And the purpose of the study group that we began in 1981 was to attempt to develop a philosophically rigorous, Christian Lebenswelt. We wanted, as privileged black people at Harvard, to develop the kind of Christian intelligentsia that would integrate service to the poor with an intellectually sophisticated understanding of the politics of social policy. After leaving Harvard, we committed ourselves to develop an intentional Christian community which would then move into the neighborhoods to work and live among the poor. It was within the context of our practical field work that the conceptual argument of the first part of my talk was developed. Because what we recognized is that when you worked and lived among the poor, the issues that were most challenging to them were not ultimately the racism of other people. What we discovered is that these young people were suffering from moral and cultural poverty as a function of the weakness of the families. In the vast majority of cases in these poor neighborhoods, which I had seen in Philadelphia, Chicago, Jersey City, and in this case, Dorchester, it was the weakness of the family and the inability of the families to transmit the cultural capital, which was a prerequisite for mobility. There was the absence of the mother and father that engaged in the intergenerational transmission of the cultural values which lend themselves to achievement. In 1984, we spent an entire year, every Thursday night, poring over all of the major social science literature on the inner city. We started with Webb Du Bois at the end of the 19th century, coming straight up to William Jewis Wilson through Patrick Moynihan, looking at all of the relevant social science literature, historical literature, and all of the relevant empirical studies that had been conducted to look at the issue confronting the poorest of the poor. What we discovered in the process of attempting to integrate an intellectually sophisticated analysis of the relevant social science with practical work on the ground was that the priorities that confronted the black community as we saw the emergence of the black underclass was to help young men become husbands and fathers, because father absenteeism was a greater contributor to juvenile delinquency than the lack of income. Because in many cases, if the family stuck together, if the father did not walk out on the mother, he could play a greater role in assisting the young son and daughter in making it in society. And that for the vast majority of young males, it was the absence of a strong father figure who could love and defend and discipline that young man that resulted in too many instances these young men pursuing lives of crime. So, number one, we discovered, based on our field work in the hood, working with the gangs, that we had to work to resurrect a vision of family, with the father as head working in complementary relationship with the mother to socialize the children. Number two, we understood that without some broader conception of family, no amount of federal, state, or welfare state intervention would be able to overturn the cultural problems, the promiscuity, the infidelity which plagued and destabilized these families chronically. We also learned, as a result of our practical field work, that only with a vision and a movement that focused on the needs of these families were we in a position over the long term to rebuild civil society.